Hey students, welcome to another lecture with Mrs. T. In this video, you're going to need to follow along and take notes about the difference between macro scale and micro scale in sociology. These are some really foundational key concepts to go ahead and get in our toolkit right now, because we're going to be using these concepts and differentiating between these two concepts for the whole rest of the semester. A lot of the work that you do in your projects is going to require that you are able to distinguish between macro scale sociology and micro scale sociology. So let's get busy with this. Okay, so macro sociology, macro level, macro scale, regardless of what word you hear me say, if it has macro in the word, we're talking about large scale patterns of society, social structure, entire patterns that affect entire populations. We're talking about large groupings of people, whether it's people in a state or even a county, whether it's people in a country or regions that are bound together by like military alliances or economic agreements. These kinds of groupings of large portions of a population are referred to as macro scale sociology, macro sociology. So I have some examples written here on the page behind me in this video. And macro sociology refers to all of these things that I have listed here and more. So for instance, if there is a pattern for that the government follows, like a representative democracy or a republic or a monarchy or a dictatorship, these kinds of patterns affect social life for everybody involved in that particular society. So there are things called social facts that I have written here on the board behind me. A social fact is a patterned way of thinking, of feeling, and of acting in social life that we are born into a society with these patterns, and we are subject to these patterns as individuals. And so a pattern way of thinking, feeling, and acting, what does this mean? Well, I just rattled off these different types of government organizations. And when I say representative democracy, or when I say a republic, these two words are probably, they probably don't elicit a lot of protest feelings in you, because this is the kind of structure that our government in the United States follows. But if I say something like a monarchy or a dictatorship or even oligarchy, these are other patterns that when you take your political science class, you will certainly learn what they are. But a monarchy, of course, is ruled by a king or a royal class of people. A dictator is somebody who we usually think of as very harsh and the people have no say in what's going on in social life. And so these patterns exist in societies around the world. And when someone is born into that pattern, it's through no choice of their own. When someone is born into that pattern, your social life and your social experience growing up and living life underneath that social structure is going to be different from life in a republic or in a democracy or in a monarchy, these different kinds of patterns. Also, you can think about the way our economic structure is designed in a place like the United States, where capitalism or corporate structure has profit at the basis of economic exchange. You are in school right now, not because you want to get a low-paying job and never really have status symbols or be able to, have a good income. You're in college right now because you are responding to a macro scale pattern of wanting to have a profit. We are born into a society that has capitalism as our economic pattern. It's our social fact. It's a patterned way of thinking, feeling, and acting that exists on the macro scale but controls us on the micro scale. That's a good definition of a social fact. A patterned way of thinking, feeling, and acting that exists on the macro scale, so you and I really have very little control over it, but it affects us on a daily basis, whether we know it or not. So think about that going to school scenario. Why are you in school? You're not in school so that you can go get a low paying job or a job with no promotion potential. You're in school. Most often you are in school, not just because it's fun. I do get people from time to time say, "Oh, I would be here anyway," or "I'm 65 and so I wanted to go to school for fun." Okay, but most often there is at least part of us that the reason we're in school to begin with is because we want to have a better chance at better income, a better lifestyle, higher, chances of promotion potential and those kinds of things. And is that really a decision that you and I made for ourselves, or is that just our response to the macro scale social pattern of capitalism that we inherited at birth? So macro scale parts of social structure are super duper important for affecting the way that that we live out our lives in a daily basis. Okay. Microsociology, pardon me, on the other hand, is the you and me level. If any of you have taken speech communication or interpersonal communication, another class that you can take, you will learn a ton of different patterns that people follow. You'll learn about reading body language and how we communicate with symbolism, even our tone of voice. I think about the way that I come from a big family, and my parents would have to call one or the other of us, at some point or another during the day, and you could always tell whether they were happy with you, unhappy with you, whether you were in trouble, are they impatient, was it just a casual thing they were going to say to you, just by the tone of voice that they used when they called your name. So my name is Mary Kate, and if I heard my mother say Mary Kate and it's just like that, it was a casual thing. Like my bristles weren't up, and I didn't know, I wasn't on guard for what was about to happen in that situation. But if I heard her say Mary Kate and the tone of voice was different, I would immediately interpret, I would immediately be on my guard, so to speak. What now? What have I done, or what is the complaint going to be, or something? So I am immediately interpreting that situation, and I'm creating kind of an outcome of what the experience is going to be like based on how I interpreted that tone of voice. And so those kinds of really, really you and me level observations and social patterns that exist are a part of what we study in microsociology. It's just part of what we study in microsociology, because it's important to note that in sociology, the systematic study of society and human interaction, we are not simply studying human interaction just for the heck of it. We're studying it to try to understand how larger social patterns that exist on the macro scale actually affect the day-to-day life of you and me on the micro scale. How do those patterns affect our choices? How do those patterns of dominance, for instance, in a household, parents have control over children, how do those things play out in daily life experience, our expectations for the future, the way that my mother treated me and my father treated me as a child, I learned from that. And so as I grow and take over those same roles that they occupied, when I'm an adult, do I treat people the same way? How did I change that interaction pattern? Why did I change that interaction pattern? Were there macro scale changes in society that would have affected my decision to make to have a departure from those patterns if I did? And so those kinds of connections between macro and micro are very, very important in sociology. And in our next video, it might not be the very next one, but one of the videos you're going to watch in this week's content folder is about a guided notes page that I have created for you so that you can start to, like on paper, differentiate between macro scale parts of social structure and micro scale parts of daily life. Literally make a list of them, literally describe what they are. So for instance, social facts, here's a word that I have highlighted up here underneath macro sociology. And this is one of the macro scale components of the mega macro scale. Actually, I would put social facts under mega macro scale parts of society, because it's a pattern way of thinking, feeling, and acting that exists on the macro scale, but it brings about behavioral outcomes from us on the micro scale because we respond to these patterns. And so what you should do while you're taking notes is make sure that you indicate for yourself, hey, social facts, this is an important key term. Here's what it means. And it happens to be a macro scale concept, not a micro scale concept, a macro scale concept. So keep track of these things when I cover them. Here's another one that I haven't defined for you on this particular video. Social institutions, you'll read about this in chapter 1. Social institutions exist on the macro scale. They are part of our social structure, the framework or the blueprint, you could say, of how our society is organized. And so you need to get a definition of what a social institution is from chapter 1. You will hear me define it in future videos. But when you are writing down this definition, make sure that you indicate for yourself it is a macro scale component of social life. Okay, so the you and me level has those components in it too, like life experience. Your life experience of being a college student is governed by a whole bunch of macro scale parts of society, like the economic system, like the workforce, like the way that we have organized our educational system. Our society does not accept merely a 12th grade education, a high school diploma anymore for important jobs like nursing or skilled jobs, for instance, like woodworking or culinary arts, for instance. You see that a higher level of knowledge past that 12th grade education is required by our society. So if you want to have a life experience of certain types of jobs in your lifetime, then you have to follow society's rules that exist on the macro scale in order for you to have access to those jobs that might particularly interest you in your life. And so there's a really important link between macro scale parts of social structure and micro scale parts of social structure. So please take a second to pause this video or, scroll back to where I've got this written on the board here behind me about macro scale and the micro scale stuff I have written also. Please at least take down this information that I have taken the time to type for you. But please also note that there's so much more that you need to fill in the gaps about what I have spoken to you about these topics. So make sure that you review parts of this video, go back and write down aspects that sound important to you. This video is, let me see, just over 13 minutes long, and every word is important. So whatever sticks out to you as meaningful and a good explanation that's going to help you understand and remember something, take time now to write it down in these notes so that you have some meat to chew on. This is just the bones of what we are, of what you need to get from this video. You need a lot more of the meat to chew on, which is what we've discussed in these last 13 minutes. Okay, I will see you again in the next video for another lesson. Bye.